No, this is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is March 21st, the 80th day of the year. Just 285 days remain to the year's over with. And for those that like to know what day it is, it's National Single Parent Day, National Crunchy Taco Day, National French Bread Day, and World Poetry Day. Well, I was asked to not give you every holiday observances because as the year goes on, they get longer and longer and longer. Of course, I started doing that when y'all asked me to. And speaking of that, I started, when I was on Blog Talk Radio, I was listened to by over 7 million people around the world. Well, Blog Talk went the way of the dodo, and I am now on 20-some-odd other platforms, but my numbers dropped because folks quit knowing where to find me. So when you find my show, if you like it, or even if you don't, subscribe. That helps. Well, we've been talking about UFOs the last show or two. And in spite of what people think, UFOs are not a new phenomena. The term flying saucer wasn't used until 1947. But there are reports written by ancient Egyptian writers that talk about UFOs. I've got one right now from the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The governor, John Winthrop, he made a most unusual entry in his diary. It was March 1st, 1639. He wrote about an event that happened earlier that year when 3 Puritan men rowing a boat through swampland near the Charles River. He saw a bright light in the night sky. According to the English governor, when it stood still, it flamed up. It was about 3 yards square. When it ran, it was contracted into the figure of a swine. Winthrop wrote that the light ran as swift as an arrow between the men in the village of Charlestown, which was about 2 miles away. When all the nightly fireworks ended, about 2 hours later, men found their boat that had drifted a mile upstream as they watched the lights was right back where they had started the journey. No idea how that happened. Winthrop seemed sold on the story and wrote that one of the men in the boat, James Everell, was a sober, discreet man, and other credible persons saw that light that night. Now, of course, naysayers say it could have been caused by swamp gas, since they were in a swamp, but the light didn't rise as swamp gas would have. Now, swamp gas can be ignited, no question about that. And then we have a story from Japan in the year 1803. According to this story, Japanese fishermen were casting their nets on the beach in Hitachi province. It was February 1803. And they spotted a most unusual boat. It was a circular craft of red lacquered wood with bar-covered windows made of glass or crystal. Well, they hauled this vessel ashore and found the lower part was covered in metal plates. Measured about 11 feet by 18 feet. And it reminded the fishermen of a round kuro, or incense burner. They peered through the windows and saw the hollow interior was decorated with strange writings, along with bed sheets and a bottle of water, needed meat, and some cake. Then they saw the passenger. They said it was a woman, about 4 feet tall, looked to be about 20. They said she had pale pink skin, red hair streaked with white, wore clothes of some mysterious fabric, and when she spoke, nobody could understand her. And of course, she couldn't understand the fishermen either. And they said she was carrying a white box. Now, this craft is known in Japan as a surobuni, or hollow boat, and its arrival was widely memorialized in near contemporaneous 19th century writings, woodcuts, and ink drawings carried in a number of newspapers. Among the many explanations for the craft and the woman, well, they came from another planet. Skeptics, of course, suggest a sighting, if it happened at all, might have been a European or Russian woman, maybe cast out to sea as some sort of punishment. Japan at that time was closed off to much of the world, and this had been the first non-Asian woman anybody in that country would ever have seen. Now, the stories differ about what actually happened to the woman. Some stories say she floated away, or others say she stayed in Japan and lived to an old age, assimilated into the society. If she was an alien, or from another planet, that is, she certainly had quite an awakening here. You know, I've written about people from other planets numerous times, and that's what cost me my Facebook account. I used the term alien, and somebody at Facebook thought that was racist. Of course, they're the end-all, be-all. Well, from Japan, let's turn to California. November 1898. Hundreds of people in California's capital, Sacramento, looked into the night sky and saw something right out of Jules Verne's Robert the Conqueror, which wasn't published till 10 years later. But this wasn't a science fiction event. This was the first of about 150 sightings of a mystery ship that glided across the U.S. from late 1896 to mid-1897. That's according to stories in multiple newspapers from that time period. Among the many witnesses quoted in the press was a Civil War veteran and journalist named Colonel Henry Glenville Shaw. He told the Stockton Evening Mail that while on a buggy ride in the town of Lodi, California, with his young companion, Camille Spooner, their horses suddenly stopped and started snorting in terror. And looking around, they saw three strange beings, resembled humans in many respects, but not like anything anybody had ever seen. They were nearly 7 feet tall and very slender. Well, Shaw gathered up his courage and asked them where they were from, and they didn't seem to understand him, but they responded with a warbling sounds. That was the best explanation he could give. They didn't talk, they warbled. Well, after similar articles about the airship sightings appeared in newspapers, now Arkansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Kansas, and Texas, reports faded away and were largely lost to history until interest in UFOs flourished in the 1970s. Researchers don't have any explanation for the sudden wave of airship sightings. Could have started with a hoax or even a legitimate sighting of an inventor's craft that unleashed mass hysteria fueled by newspapers in what was called the Yale journalism era, when there was no hesitancy about printing sensational, uncorroborated reports in order to sell papers. And certainly there have been many, many stories of a similar nature about every topic you can imagine. The sad thing is, there was never any follow-up, no expansion. Well, from Sacramento and its mysterious aircraft, let's go to Phoenix, Arizona. The so-called Phoenix Lights. Actor Kurt Russell was in the room with his partner Goldie Hawn. I was watching a documentary about the Phoenix Lights. It's one of the most famous mass sightings of UFOs to date. Well, something about the documentary caught his attention. TV show mentioned that the first witness to this strange formation of 6 lights over Phoenix in 1997 was a private pilot who radioed the sightings to air traffic controllers at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. And he realized they were talking about him. On the night of March 13, 1997, Kurt Russell, who's also a licensed pilot, was flying his son Oliver Hudson into Phoenix to see his girlfriend when Russell spotted the lights. He said they were absolutely uniform in a V shape, about a half mile from the runway. He said, I kind of came out of my reverie and said, I don't know what they are. He gave an interview with the BBC in 2017, and he said his son was concerned about their safety, and he said, yeah, we're safe, but I'm going to call it in anyway. And he reported it in to the Sky Harbor air traffic control. When the tower responded, radar didn't pick up anything. He said, well, I'm going to declare it's unidentified. It's flying, and there's 6 of them. And he landed and went on about his life. Checked with his flight logbook for that night, confirmed the date matched up with the first report of the mysterious Phoenix Lights. He said, I was feeling like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He said, had I never seen that show, I'd never thought about it again. Well, this account came up appropriately enough in an interview to promote the movie Guardians of the Galaxy, in which he played an extraterrestrial visitor to Earth. People who see UFOs come from all walks of life. There's no one profession that guarantees that you will see them. Not even every pilot has seen them. I saw one while I was a Army officer. In fact, we shot at the sucker. Didn't do any good, but it was a long, long story, and we used up 2,500 rounds of ammunition. And as I said, it's all walks of life that report seeing UFOs. There's even a report from the former president of the United States. Years before he became president, Jimmy the Peanut Man Carter saw something in the sky that made him a believer. It was a crisp winter night in January 1969. He's still a peanut farmer. Future President Jimmy Carter was standing outside a small restaurant in Larry, Georgia. He's going to give a speech to the Lions Club when another member of the little group standing on the outside the restaurant pointed up in the sky and said, look over in the west. That's when Carter and 10 other members of the Lions Club saw what he later described as a luminous object hovering over the horizon that looked about as large as the moon. And initially it appeared to be blue in color. He said it got smaller and changed to a reddish color, and then it got larger again. About 10 minutes later, the object seemed to move away, and then it disappeared. He said it got brighter and brighter and didn't have any solid substance to it. It was just a very peculiar-looking light. None of us ever understood what it was. 4 years later, he became governor of Georgia. And Carter was a former Navy officer, reported his eerie experience to a group called the International UFO Bureau in Oklahoma City. Now, while this object was technically undefined and flew, Carter didn't characterize it as an alien visitation. Instead, he thought it might have been due to an electrical occurrence of some sort. Well, when he was running for president, Jimmy Carter promised if he won the election, he'd encourage the government to release every piece of information that was available to the public. It was a pledge, unfortunately, he did not keep, because much of that information remained under wraps for what was termed national security reasons. Experts believe that what Carter saw and others spotted was the planet Venus, which was at its brightest at the time of year. Or maybe a glowing chemical crowd from Lockett's launch from an Air Force base in Florida. Whatever it was, it made Jimmy Carter into a believer. He said, I'm convinced UFOs exist because I've seen one. Well, there's always people coming up with explanations for what other people see, even though they've never seen it themselves. Because they all start from the premise there are no UFOs. It's misidentification of some natural phenomena, or it's a mischaracterization of something else. They never go to the simplest explanation. It's something from out of this planet. Well, it's not just Kurt Russell and Jimmy Carter. Singers Demi Lovato and Camila Cabello both spoken out about their experiences with the unknown. Doing an appearance on singer Keisha's video podcast at the Keisha and the Creepies in 2021, Demi Lovato recalled a spine-tingling trip to Joshua Tree National Park in California's high desert. And on that trip, she spotted more than the curious trees with tufts of spiky leaves. He said, we saw this really, really bright light. First of all, this blue orb kept floating in front of us like 20 or 30 feet away. And she took a picture with her cell phone. And she held it up during the interview and said, when I tried to walk toward it, it would hop another 20 or 30 feet away. So I could never chase it and get to it, but I kept trying. The singer's certain it was visitors from another world, and it left her forever changed. She wanted an Instagram in October 2020. It was just some of the evidence from under the stars in the desert sky that can no longer be ignored and has to be shared immediately. Well, Lovato hosted the Peacock limited series Unidentified about UFO phenomena. In 2021, isn't the only pop star to experience a close encounter. On the Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon in 2022. Havana singer Camila Cabello shared a video clip she captured of something in the sky. She said it doesn't look like a bird. She took that picture while visiting the mountains of South America. She says she considers herself a skeptic, but said the video would open her eye to new possibilities, even if she still had a joke about it going on national TV with her account. He said, if the aliens trusted me to be there at that moment, I don't want them to think I'm exploiting them right now. Well, Fallon tried to reassure her, of course, making it clear he didn't think the aliens would watch his show. And not a lot of others did either. He certainly was nowhere near as popular as Jay Leno. Well, even Fran Drescher, the nanny, believes that she and her ex-husband were destined to meet after they both had alien encounters as kids. She has a bond with her ex-husband, Peter Mark Jacobson. It's truly out of this world. Nanny actress believes that when she was a junior high, she was abducted by aliens and planted a chip in her head. And she wasn't the only one. That might account for the sound of her voice. She said, it's funny because Peter and I both saw aliens before we knew each other, doing the same thing, driving on the road with our dads. That was Drescher talked about this during an interview in the Huffington Post in 2012. Drescher and Jacobson would meet a few years later and marry in 1978. She said, we both got this scar, an exact same looking scar on the exact same spot on our bodies. Now, Jacobson doesn't subscribe to the alien implant theory. So he just thinks Drescher's scar came from a drill bit or maybe hot liquid. He was the producer of What I Like About You. He had offered up an explanation for his own matching scar, though. They divorced in 1999 after 21 years of marriage, but remained business partners and close friends. And though they moved on to other love interests, Drescher's always believed somehow we were programmed to meet. And certainly, she's not the only one that has that type of belief. There are many, many others who believe that their lives have been planned out by fate, if nothing else. Well, no less an entity than Sammy Hagar claimed he was experimented on by visitors from another planet. He said it scared him nearly to death. It was an experience he couldn't understand. He insists he was experienced an alien abduction 50 years ago. He acknowledged that may sound like he's a crazy person. That was what he said in an interview with MTV in 2021. He wrote a memoir called Red. And in that memoir, he talked about it. He portrayed it as a dream about encountering aliens. He said it actually was the real thing. He said they plugged into me. He was the front man for Montrose and Van Halen, which is why you may be familiar with his name. He said it was a download situation, or they uploaded something from my brain like an experiment. This was in the 1970s, before Hagar made it big. He was living near San Bernardino, California. He said, I was just lying in bed when I felt something weird going on, like somebody was tapping into my brain. He said, at the time, I didn't know how to explain it. Maybe the strangest thing is this wasn't his first close encounter. He insists when he was 4 years old, he saw what he was certain was an alien ship flying over a field near his family home in Northern California. And certainly many of us have early memories of things that really don't make sense. Well, from Sammy Hagar, let's turn to Muhammad Ali. He told a UFO expert he believed alien visitors were of tremendous importance to the whole world. For his 2015 book, Shirley MacLaine Meets the Palladians, plus the amazing fly saucer experiences, celebrities, rock stars, the rich and famous, Timothy Green Beckley, author and UFO expert, gathered out-of-this-world tales from the likes of Jackie Gleason and William Shatner and Shirley MacLaine. But of all the stars on Earth, stories about encounters with creatures from the stars, Beckley said nobody seemed to know more about the subject, at least from a first-hand point of view, than retired heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali. In 4 meetings, the legendary athlete told the author that alien visitations were of tremendous importance to the whole world. And he even claimed to have seen alien ships we described as just round and big. He said, I happened to look up just before dawn, as I often do while running, and there hovering above me was this brilliant light hanging as if by an invisible thread. Now, of course, Ali died in 2016. But Beckley quoted him as saying, first I thought it was a beacon projected from a helicopter, but minutes later a similar object passed right in front of us. When he later saw a second ship with a red trail behind it, he said, I brought it to the attention of my trainer, who was standing nearby. We watched him come from behind the sky and light and move slowly across the sky for at least 15 minutes. He also claims UFOs have been watching over him for quite some time. That's according to the book, which might be worth your time to get after you buy my books. You can find them on Ken Hudnall on Amazon. You can also go to, we're getting ready to put up a new website where you can, almost all my books will be available as ebook downloads. Well, from Muhammad Ali, let's go to Dan Aykroyd, star of Ghostbusters. He hosts History's The Unbelievable, and he had a story of his own. And in writing the screenplay that would eventually become Ghostbusters, Aykroyd drew on his family's long fascination with paranormal events. Going back to his great-grandfather, who held seances at his Ontario farmhouse. But Aykroyd reveals he had his own otherworldly experiences, but not with ghosts, but with visitors from outer space. It's January 2024. Former Saturday Night Live star told Fox News he had spotted UFOs at least 4 times, including a close flyby of a UFO that got within 50 feet of Aykroyd's 23rd floor hotel room in Montreal for about 90 seconds before it floated away over the St. Lawrence River. He said there were no lights at all. Just a big gray object that looked like a Macy's Day Parade balloon. And for the doubters, Aykroyd, who hosts the series The Unbelievable on the History Channel about strange but true stories, says there were some friends in the room that saw it too. He said, I know what I saw, and I know I had a witness with me, and I know it was a vivid sighting. So if you want to try to discount it, you got to have some pretty solid evidence. Just saying it's not possible is not sufficient. And of course, one star who, from his very look, must have been encountered with, in contact with strange entities. Let's talk about David Bowie. Before he became rich and famous, he worked for a UFO magazine, and he claimed to have multiple sightings. There was many musical personas. Boy, otherworldly Ziggy Stardust with his Spiders from Mars from the early 70s is among the late rock star's most memorable characters. But his link to aliens and UFOs and other outer space happenings extended far beyond his music. He did a 1975 interview with Cream magazine. He said he worked for a UFO magazine in England and regularly witnessed UFOs. He said, I made sightings 6 or 7 times a night for about a year when I was in the observatory. They'd be stationary for up to half an hour. And then after verifying what they'd been doing that day, they'd shoot off. Well, Bowie worked for the magazine just before releasing his 1969 album with his breakout hit Space Oddity, about the doomed spaceman Major Tom floating in the most peculiar way. One of the first projects he worked on before his death in January 2016, or one of the final projects, rather, he worked on before his death in January 2016 was Lazarus, a musical inspired by the role he played in the 1976 movie The Man That Fell to Earth. It's about an alien able to return to his home planet. There's been a number of theories about the fact that the Earth is actually a prison planet for those on other planets who can't fit in. Maybe yes, maybe no. Well, it may surprise you to know that quite a number of celebrity, rich and famous, believe in aliens and they reportedly have seen UFOs. One you might find hard to believe is the king of rock and roll himself, Elvis Presley. 2 of his confidants claim he believed in aliens and had seen UFOs on several occasions. His Elvis Presley's spiritual advisor and personal hairstylist, Larry Geller, claims the king of rock and roll constantly talked about seeing strange flying objects, sometimes in the desert, sometimes over Graceland, his mansion in Memphis, Tennessee, and he was absolutely certain these were not airplanes he was seeing, but they were UFOs. In fact, UFOs seemed to follow the superstar from the moment he was born. It's Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, said he'd gone out to have a cigarette at 2 o'clock in the morning during the delivery. That's according to an interview Geller gave to the Daily Express. And he said he looked up into the sky above their little shack and saw the strangest blue light. He knew right then and there that something special was going to take place. Geller also claimed that Presley, who died in 1977, said he communicated telepathically with aliens when he was 8 years old. He had a vision of his adult self in a white jumpsuit, although he didn't understand what it meant at that point in time. Presley's cousin Billy Smith confirmed the singer believed in aliens. Smith said on his YouTube channel. Elvis was really interested in them. Talked about him a lot, how big the universe is, and the fact that we could be the only... He didn't believe that we could be the only ones that God created. He said, God is not limited. Well, interestingly enough, or ironically enough, his 1973 Aloha from Hawaii concert was broadcast live around the world through satellite, which at the time he was born was something absolutely unbelievable. Well, there have been countless films made about UFOs and visitors from other planets. Body Snatchers, Blobs, E.T., who wanted to phone home. You could easily have called collect. That wouldn't have been an issue. Interestingly enough, the Close Encounters of the Third Kind was originally titled Kingdom Come. Then, of course, we had the Mars Attacks Invaders, voiced by the same person. Men in Black was based on the comic book series. Independence Day was the highest-grossing film of 1996. All of them dealt with aliens. Leave it to Steven Spielberg to create one of the greatest extraterrestrial spaceships in movie history as the giant, round, brightly lit, multi-level mothership in a 1977 blockbuster film. It's seen emerging over Devil's Tower in Wyoming. And it released abductees from different eras. World War II pilots to children and animals. And then they selected, of all people, Richard Dreyfuss to leave with them. Then, when we look at Mars Attacks, which is based on a Topps trading card series, it was what was referred to as a black comedy, featuring an all-star cast. Annette Bening, Danny DeVito, Jack Nicholson. In fact, Nicholson played 2 roles in that film. The U.S. president and a casino owner. And we had goofy-looking, big-headed aliens with exposed brains flying in a retro stainless steel-looking saucer. And then one of my favorites, of course, was Men in Black. Starred the sharply dressed Agent J, Will Smith, and Agent K, Tommy Lee Jones. They monitored alien activity around the planet. Turns out ETs are actually everywhere. So to track down an intergalactic terrorist bent on destroying multiple worlds, they went on to launch an extremely lucrative Hollywood movie franchise. And in Independence Day, before he was a Man in Black, Will Smith led an unlikely ensemble of Jeff Goldblum and Bill Pullman and Randy Quaid and Harvey Feinstein. It was a 1996 mega-budget disaster flick. An alien mothership and its saucers blow up the White House, wiping out entire cities, killing millions, and making the studio a fortune and making Will Smith a top-rated action star. Well, then, of course, the one that is still talked about and seen today, we have E.T., the extraterrestrial. 1982, Steven Spielberg gave what many consider his greatest, most heartwarming movie. The story of a boy who befriended an alien abandoned on Earth who just wanted to phone home. It was a story inspired by the director's own imaginary boyhood friend after his parents' divorce, which makes you wonder just how weird is Steven Spielberg. Then we got the movie called Signs. The emergence of those mysterious crop circles in M. Night Shyamalan's 2002 film starring Mel Gibson, Joaquin Phoenix, and Abigail Breslin. It sets the stage for an alien invasion of Earth that reached creepy proportions when one of them wound up in a Family's Pantry. Yeah, that's a strange place to find an alien, let me tell you. Then we have the movie Arrival. Amy Adams received rave reviews in this 2016 film for her portrayal of a linguist upset with the death of her daughter, who figured out a way to communicate with a pair of seven-limbed aliens after cracking the code to their complicated written language. And then we have a movie called Nope. As he did with his film Get Out and Us, director Jordan Peele tinkered with the movie genre tropes to create something entirely new. It was a 2022 hybrid Western horror sci-fi film about siblings who trained horses for Hollywood. And they discover a UFO is kidnapping their animals. So they recruit a cinematographer to capture it all on film for fame and fortune. And sat back and waited on the aliens to arrive. And then we have an old standby, War of the Worlds. Orson Welles' radio show adaptation of the H.G. Wells novel Sent America into a Tizzy in 1938. People riding around in their pickup trucks with shotguns waiting to shoot at those aliens. Well, this 2005 movie version, directed by Spielberg and starring Tom Cruise and Dakota Fanning, updated the story just a bit to modern times with lots of action, but not the same feel as Spielberg's previous Alien films. And then another film that got a lot of discussion was District 9. It was an independent film shot on a small budget, but it had big ideas. It was the debut movie by director Neil Blomkamp. In 2009, told the story of insect-like animals confined to an internment camp in a searing sci-fi metaphor of the apartheid area in Blomkamp's native South Africa. Now I've got my computer talking to me. Oh, well. Well, there's no question there have been far more alien-related films than you would think at this point in time. You know, when I was in Area 51, Rachel, Nevada, I took a busload of people there years ago when I was doing my California radio show. And the Little Ailey Inn was the primary business. It was a restaurant. They had phenomenal hamburgers. And everybody in that area would come into the Little Ailey Inn. And there were several films underway at the time I was there. Never saw any activity, but they had their signs and they had their trailers and they had all the stuff you would think filmmakers would have. And of course at night, everybody and their dog was out there with binoculars waiting for the lights to come over from Area 51. The fascinating aspect to it is at that point in time, the government had not yet admitted Area 51 existed. And later on, it was admitted that it was a base to train test, train, and develop spy planes. I don't think so. Well, that finishes our UFO segment. Now we've been talking about all kinds of bizarre things. Yeah, bizarre doesn't get enough discussion. There, of course, is enough bizarre creatures on the planet. We don't really have to import them. There has. I was looking for As you might guess, I wind up with more notes than I know what to do with. I got a story submitted to me about a creature that seems to be found in South Carolina. It haunts the woods and little town of Lee County, South Carolina. Specifically, the Scape or Swamp area. It's referred to by the locals as Lizard Man, as a result of its alleged green and scaly body. It appears to be a case of the creature from the Black Lagoon come to light. There are those that claim that creatures like this are actually aliens. I tend to doubt that. Alien to us, yes, but aliens from another planet, no. It's a bipedal lizard that roams the neighborhood. Research undertaken years later suggests the Lizard Man was something far more akin to Bigfoot than anything from outer space. The story all began July 14th, 1988. The Way family phoned the Lee County Sheriff's Office and made a strange and disturbing claim. Something wild and animalistic had attacked their 1985 Ford. Looked like something large and powerful and deeply savage and viciously clawed and even bitten the body of the vehicle, particularly the hood. Well, somewhat baffled, the deputies responded to the call. And sure enough, the Ways were right about the target. Their vehicle was battered and bruised to the extreme. And there were footprints all over the muddy area. So in came Sheriff Liston Truesdale. He said there was a strong probability those prints were those of a fox. Of course, larger prints were found, and they were suspected of being those of a bear. Although there was a suggestion those prints had something of a human quality to them. Well, in small-town America, it didn't take long before the news got out, and numerous locals turned out to see what all the fuss was about. And it's notable that Sheriff Truesdale told Bigfoot investigator Lyle Blackburn, who wrote the definitive book on the subject, called Lizard Man, that while we were looking over this situation, learned that people in the Browntown community had been seeing a strange creature about 7 feet tall with red eyes. Some said he was green, others said he was brown. But they all agreed that this is probably what was responsible for the attack on the vehicle. So, a mystery was released. Publicity afforded the way incident prompted somebody who ultimately became a key player in the matter to come forward. His name was Chris Davis. He was 17 years old. Davis's father, Tommy, had seen the sensationalized coverage given by the media of the attack on the Hayes' vehicle and contacted the sheriff. Told his son to tell the police the story he had told him. And it was, in fact, quite a story. Back in 1988, Chris was working at a local McDonald's. Night of June 29th, about 2 weeks before the Way affair exploded, Chris was on the late shift. That meant he didn't finish work till at least 2 in the morning. His drive home ensured he had to take a road across the swamp, specifically a heavily forest part of the swamp. And once he got into this isolated area, he had a flat. Well, Chris pulled up at a crossroads and, using the bright moonlight, changed the tire. As he finished the job and put the tools back in the trunk, he saw something looming out of the trees. It was large, it was human-like in shape, and possessed 2 glowing red eyes and 3 fingers on each hand. In other words, it was something we would consider horrific. Well, Chris panicked and jumped in his vehicle and sped off. Based on what Chris had to say next, that was probably a very wise move. He said, I looked back and saw something running across the field toward me. He's about 25 yards away, and I saw those red eyes glowing. He said, I ran into the car, and as I locked it, the thing grabbed the door handle. He said he could see him from the neck down. 3 big fingers, long black nails, green rough skin. It was strong, and it appeared to be angry. He said, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw a blue or green running, and I could see his toes, and he jumped on the roof of my car. He said, I thought I heard a grunt, and then I could see his fingers through the front windshield, where they curled around on the roof, and I floored it and swerved to shake the creature off. Well, the reports, as you might guess, get in there. Sheriff Truesdale got more and more reports to the extent that almost an X-Files style dossier was compiled. It was an official police dossier that contained a fascinating account of John Brythers, who on July 31st, 1990, reported his experiences to the Sheriff's Department. He said last night, that would have been July 30th, 1990, about 10:30 in the evening, we were coming home from the Browntown section of Lee County. He said it was me, my mother, Bertha May Blyther, 2 sisters. Started talking about the time we passed the flowing well in Scapework Swamp. He said, there ain't no such thing as a lizard man. If there was, somebody would see it and they'd catch it. Well, they're about a mile or mile and a half past the Butterbean shed, about 50 feet from the dirt road by those 2 signs. His mother was driving the car. He said it was on the right side. It came out of the bushes. It jumped out in the road. My mother swerved to miss it, mashed the brakes, and sped up. Jumped out of the bushes like he could jump on the car. When his mother hit the brakes, it looked like it wanted to get in the car. His mother had her own statement to add to that story. She said, this past Monday night, I went to my mother's house in Browntown to pick up my son. Went to McDonald's on Highway 15 near Bishopville to get something to eat, and left there about 20 minutes after 10 that night. We were headed home and came through Browntown and Scrapework Swamp. He said we passed the bridge and was down the road near a mile, and I was looking straight ahead, doing about 25 miles an hour, and saw this big brown thing. Jumped up at the window, and I sped up and went on the other side of the road to keep it from dragging my 11-year-old girl out of the car. She said, I didn't see it with my lights directly on it. It nearly scared me to death. And then Bertha's daughter, Tamasia, added her statement. She said it's tall. It's taller than the car. Brown looking, big chest, big eyes, had 2 arms. Said, I don't know how his face looked, but first I seen his eyes. Never seen nothing like him before. Didn't see a tail. Now, Mother says if she hadn't whipped over, he'd have hit the car or jumped on it. Mother says she was so scared her body light, and she held her heart all the way home. In addition, Lyle Blackburn had uncovered other reports about the creature dating from 1986 to well into the 2000s. Now, 2 of the key players in this little drama are dead. Johnny Blythers and Chris Davis. Brythers was killed in a car accident in 1999, and Davis was killed from a shotgun blast. That was a result of a drug deal going bad. Almost a decade to the day after Blythers' death. So that's for the legendary lizard man. You have to ask yourself, what was it? Certainly the name provoked imagery of a malevolent, scaly green monster. On the other hand, let's not forget that there were some reports to the creature having a brown color. All of which leads to Lyle Blackburn's conclusions. Now, Blackburn undertook a personal on-site investigation with his colleague Cindy Lee and studied all the evidence in an unbiased fashion. Blackburn noted that despite an undeniably memorable name, the various descriptions of the creature as being brown in color simply don't accord with anything of a reptilian nature. He suggested if a Bigfoot dwelled in the watery bottomlands where it might become covered in algae-rich mud or moss, this could explain the wet green-like appearance. Doesn't explain the 3 fingers, but greenish mud, when it dried and cracked, could certainly give it a scaly appearance. And it's a good theory, of course. far more likely than a huge bipedal lizard lumbering the swamps of South Carolina. Well, from South Carolina, let's talk about the Mapinguari, the Mato Grosso in Brazil. This creature has a peculiar penchant for ripping out the tongues of cattle. It's said to be a violent thing that haunts the Mato Grosso, a state in Brazil, the name of which translates into English is thick bushes, which is dominated by plains and plateaus and rainforest. And it's frankly the ideal location for a hairy man-beast to hide and thrive. Well, Randy Merrill had studied the history of the Mapinguari. He says that according to local native traditions, the Mapinguari is a prehistoric cryptid that reportedly lived, and some say still does, in the Amazon rainforest of South America, particularly in Brazil and Patagonia. It's described as having long red hair, long arms, powerful claws that could tear apart palm trees, sloping back, a crocodile-like hide with that arrows and bullets couldn't penetrate, a second mouth on its belly, and backward feet, which, of course, gives it a bottle-shaped footprint. Well, according to Randy Merrill, it's said to stand up to 6 feet tall when it assumes a bear-like stance on its hind legs. It does that when it smells a nearby human. It also gives off a putrid, disorienting stench, emitting a frightening shriek, and can be seen moving slowly and stealthily through the forest, often surprising unsuspecting locals. And although it is believed to be carnivorous, by all accounts, it didn't eat humans, which is a good thing. And finally, it's said to sometimes speak and to enjoy punishing hunters who violated religious holidays. Certain lore even seemed to link it to the South American werewolf. More wolf-like versions of the creature said to be is called wolf's cape and thought to have originally been human. But of course, they got one of the devil's belts and put it on and became a wolf. Well, a lot of the information comes from the late Dr. Bernard Hebelmans. He brought much of the story of the Mapinguari to the attention of the media and the public and the Bigfoot hunting community. One story that really stood out in the menacing stakes occurred decades ago and involves a man identified as Inocenio, an explorer taking part in an expedition on the Urubu River. Reportedly, he and his team were in hot pursuit of what was described as a group of mysterious black monkeys that they intended bagging and taking back to civilization. Unfortunately for Inocencio, didn't quite work out the way they planned. One particular night when the sun was down and the area was bathed in darkness, something vile and marauding put in an appearance. Hair-raising experience accompanied with what sounded like the panic-filled cries of a man echoing around the dense jungle environment. Now, if you've never been in a jungle, you don't know what true dark can be. Then something worse happened. Inocencio's ears were filled with the sounds of heavy feet. No doubt in his mind what was going on. Some huge, lumbering, bipedal thing was racing toward him. And that wasn't good news. And suddenly his footsteps were replaced by something else. Silence. To his horror, he could see something large and dark, man-like, lurking in the shadows. It appeared to be waiting just for the right time to launch an all-out attack. Inocencio was frozen to the spot, afraid of what might happen next, and just as the tension got unbearable, the creature let out an almighty ear-splitting roar. Well, acting on instinct more than anything else, Inocencio fired his rifle in the direction of the creature, which only seemed to annoy it as it charged toward him. Fortunately, another bullet deterred the Mapinguari from coming any closer, and it vanished into the undergrowth. showing a high degree of common sense. Inocencio spent the rest of the night perched in a high tree. When morning came, he finally got up the courage to climb down the tree, and the only evidence of the night's turmoil was splashes of blood on the ground and a strong, sour odor that filled the air. They never identified what that creature in the bushes actually was. Interestingly enough, local folklore suggests the Mapangari has the ability to make a person disoriented, to induce a nausea, sense of vertigo, and even to instill unconsciousness in a person. It may not be mere myth and legend. It's entirely possible that potentially, like its American cousins, Bigfoot, Mapangari has the ability to disable people through manipulation of infrasound. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back Monday and talk more about things from the strange and the unusual, from the paranormal, and almost anything else you can imagine. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening. And I recommend you get my books off Amazon. And if you want something that's out of this world, go to Just Cheesecake Outlet, 404 Arizona. Tell them Ken sent you and get one of those cheesecakes. They're out of this world. Till Monday, have a great weekend.